Never take a baby to a cemetery or a funeral. Have you guys ever heard of that? Because I swear I've never heard of this before. So this lady said that this happened to her family when she was around 12 years old. She does have 3 other sisters and she is the eldest. She explains how there is a 10-year difference between her and the youngest daughter. So one day her mom gets home and she tells them that their uncle's mother-in-law had passed away. She asked them to get ready because they were going to go to her funeral. So they all did end up getting ready, and she says that she was so young and innocent that instead of thinking of the tragedy that's happening and they have to go to a funeral, she was just thinking that she was so excited because she was going to get to see her cousins. They get to the funeral home, and just like she was thinking, all of her cousins were there. All of the cousins ended up playing in the street, and that is when her mom comes out really mad at her and tells her to come to her and basically says this is not a good time for you to be playing outside. Her mom made her go inside to the funeral home and made her sit next to her. She obviously listened to her mom, and when they walked into where the funeral was, that she noticed that a lot of people had already left, that it was only like the uncle's family and her mom there. There was a lot of empty seats, and she noticed that her younger sister was in her mom's arms because she was asleep. She explains how everybody was sitting very quietly, and again, there wasn't a lot of people in there. And it was in that moment where one of the chairs, an empty chair that was in the corner, dragged itself all the way to where the coffin with the body was. She didn't know what to make of what everybody had just seen, and she also said that every single person saw it because she could see all of their reactions, but she also said that nobody mentioned it, nobody talked about it throughout the entire night. She also explained how nobody moved the chair. The chair stayed where it was dragged on its own, almost like if nobody wanted to give it any importance. So a few days after the funeral and the whole chair situation happening, they noticed that the youngest sibling stopped eating and that she was starting to look very pale. They obviously took her to the doctor, but the doctor said that they found nothing, that there's no reason why she stopped eating or that why she's looking very pale. Obviously the mom was becoming desperate because how is it that they couldn't find anything wrong when obviously she's not eating, she's looking very pale. And that is when the dad suggested that she takes her to this curandera that he knew from childhood. A curandera is basically like a cleansing person. Correct me if I'm wrong. So they ended up taking her to Doña Elvira, and the girl telling the story obviously is 12 years old. She says that she has to admit that when she first saw this lady, that lady scared the fuck out of her. The fact that something like that happened to me too. There was this one time I went to Mexico, and this lady was a part of our family, but she was a known witch in that area, and I was so mean to her. I'm so lucky she didn't turn me into a fucking turkey bitch. I don't know why, the second I saw her, she scared me. And I remember she would extend her arm like, come give me a hug. And I would be like, no. And I remember I was hugging I was burying my face in my mom's stomach like, no, don't let me go. Don't let me hug her. I'm scared of her. I don't know what the fuck. I don't know why I was scared of her, but like, well, now that I'm an adult, I know why. Maybe I just sense, you know, the evil of why. Not saying that the lady in the story is a bad person. I'm just saying my family member was. Anyway, back to the story. When this lady saw her younger sister, she explained to the parents that she only had a few days to live because a dead person was taking her. She explains that the lady started asking her parents like, did you guys pass by a cemetery? Did you go into a cemetery? It's obviously the moment where her mom remembered that chair moving at the funeral and explained it to the lady. After this, the lady knew instantly what was happening. She explained to her mom that babies shouldn't go to a cemetery, to a funeral, because their souls are pure. She tells her that sometimes dead people who cannot cross over take these babies' pure souls so that they can have a direct ticket up to heaven. Okay, if you don't believe in like God in this religion, then okay, cool, but like, wouldn't God see that? Like, I'm not laughing, but like also like, wouldn't God see that? Wouldn't God know that? I have a lot of questions now. Apparently this lady says that that is how they erase all of their sins. You're telling me you're gonna erase your sins by taking a baby's pure soul? That sounds like you're just adding. Anyway, she tells the parents that she can help her, but that it was gonna take a couple of sessions to like basically get her better again. The lady saying the story says that she was never present when they were doing the cleaning to her sister because the lady would take them out of the room, but after 4 sessions they did notice that her sister was getting better. She started playing again, she started eating again, and she finally got color back in her skin. She explains that she never was told what happened because obviously she is a 12-year-old girl, and it was only now that she's an adult where her mom kind of gave her more information. So back when it happened, apparently that cleansing lady told the mom that her brother's mother-in-law was there at the funeral, her soul was there, and that she was the one that was trying to take the baby's pure soul. I have more questions though, but I feel like we don't have answers, because it's like, she had just passed away. How did she know to take a soul? Like, if I die, will I immediately know that maybe if you take a baby's soul, you'll go straight? Basically, her baby sister would have ended up dying because this lady wanted to take her pure soul, and thankfully the parents took her to this cleaning lady and were able to get the help they needed. She explains that now that she knows the complete story and everything that happened, she wants to repeat the words of this cleansing lady. Babies are pure souls, and they're very fragile, and they have no business going to funerals or cemeteries or any kind of place of this sort. Never take your babies to a funeral or a cemetery, because there are dead souls that have some sins to clean up, and they will need some pure souls to cleanse away all of their sins. But what do you guys think?
There are just some stories out there that make you stop scrolling because of how insane it sounds. Those things that just seem way too impossible to be real. Read the headline one time, you assume that there has to be some kind of exaggeration. With every new detail that you learn, it somehow gets worse and worse and worse. This is just another one of those stories. Because when authorities arrived in the Appalachian foothills of southeastern Ohio, they weren't looking for 16 children. In fact, they had absolutely no idea that there were 16 children even living at the residence. What they found inside has quickly become one of the most talked about cases that's going on currently, right now. Honestly, this is the type of case that will leave you wondering, why the fuck didn't anybody say anything? It's not like this house was just sitting alone, okay? Like, there were people who have described this house as being dilapidated, knowing that there's a family living inside of it. There's neighbors. Honestly, everybody just minds their business a little too hard. As most of you know, this story begins in Hamden, which is like a small southeastern little Appalachian town in Ohio, right? The type of place where everybody knows everybody knows every name of the street. The type of place where people live in families for generations, right? Like, usually these people don't leave. People who have never been there, it kind of seems like a picturesque, like fun, not fun, but like beautiful little area, which it is beautiful in its own ways. But the strange realities when it comes to Appalachia is that people can just disappear like that. Like, even if they've never actually left. House can be sitting down a quarter-mile driveway and literally nobody can be around in within enough miles to see who is coming and going from that house. That in itself does not make Appalachia dangerous. Cases like this certainly do not define those who live in Appalachia, right? It does mean that life can unfold completely out of view in places like these. According to the investigators of this case, that is precisely what happened here. Authorities say they were not looking for 16 children. They weren't going on some elaborate rescue mission. They weren't even investigating a missing persons case. Instead, what they would find behind that door would scar investigators and just open up a reality that prosecutors were not expecting. And that prosecutors say that when you walk through the door, it's just so hard to comprehend what is even happening. Because inside that fuck-ass house, there were 16 children ages ranging from 18 months old to 18 years old. Do you know how fucking insane that is? Apparently, they are all the children of the family, right? Like, we don't know who had who, what's going on with who, but apparently the 131-year-old woman is the mother of all of these children. We'll get into who these people are. These people had these 16 children trapped, basically, in one room, deprived of their basic care needs, you know, no hygiene. Half of them didn't even know how to communicate with investigators. A few of them, maybe all of them, I don't know how many they asked this, but I think like the one that they asked to spell their name could not spell their name, and she was the oldest of the group. Think about how impossible that sounds. 16 children being held captive in a home where there's neighbors around. And it's not like a suburban neighborhood, okay? Like I was saying in the beginning of this, like Appalachia is definitely like far on out there. So like you can go a couple miles without seeing another neighbor, but there were still neighbors. And there were still neighbors that recognized, that like knew these family, you know, knew these people, but didn't know that part about these people. But honestly, you never know what's going on in the foothills of Appalachia. While there are cryptids, there are worse people. I would honestly rather come across an SW than this motherfucker. And I don't really want to give these people the grace of talking too much about them, but I'm sure you guys have seen the mugshots. This is everybody. I just know we're going to be getting a full set video from Ewu Crew very soon with the never before seen police footage, and I don't want to say I'm excited for that, but I am quite like amped to hear like the news. Like, what the fuck that was about. Also, like I said, just because this happened in Appalachia doesn't mean that this defies everybody who lives in Appalachia. Appalachia is a place where like criminals can go and hide away. I don't know, you truly never know what's going on in another person's home. You could be walking by somebody's home and something horrific could be going on inside of it. That has actually happened to me. I have walked by a house where apparently girls were like stuck inside kidnapped. That did not sit well with me, and it still never sits well with me. That's another story for another day though. Just be careful out there and don't trust anybody. Maybe not even your neighbors.
The person that sent me the story actually doesn't have a title. It says, I just read your book. So I guess I just read my book, which by the way is this. If you want it, it's an introduction written by me and then 80 of the best stories I received up until putting this book together. It released 2 years ago. You can get it all the places. Check the link in my schmios. But anyway, so I'm assuming they just read it and they're sending their story in. So let's read that. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. My dad came from a German family that lived in Millvale, Pennsylvania, in a 3-story house on North Avenue. He had 9 siblings, the first of which was named Ellie, and she was born on a boat on the way over in 1905. Holy shit. 2 kids died in the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, the year my dad was born. The youngest was born in 1923, my Uncle Jim, who was killed 2 weeks after D-Day in June of 1944. I was curious about how he was killed, and when I asked my dad if he knew, all he ever said was, he was blown to smithereens. My grandmother told me that my dad never liked his brother and used to pick on him mercilessly. The oldest sister practically raised most of the kids. She was like a surrogate mother in a dysfunctional family. When I was a little kid, I always had bad nightmares. I would wake up screaming almost every night. My mother would come in and wake me up and calm me down so that I could sleep. She wanted to take me to a psychiatrist, but my dad wouldn't hear of it. These nightmares lasted until I was about 10 or 12, and I even had them so often that at least 4 of them are still burned into my brain, and I'm 75 now. I had a feeling that if I tried to tell anyone about my dreams that they would want to put me in a rubber room, and then I read that book, Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. I've actually never read that book, but I've heard of it, and I heard it's really good. Has anybody read that? Let me know. Sometime in the 90s, Aunt Ellie got too old to live in a 3-story house, and her niece, my cousin, was a realtor and lived in the trailer court about 5 miles from my little horse farm. She talked Aunt Ellie into buying a new trailer and putting it next door to her. Ellie was a close friend of my mother's, and Mom had arthritis bad after Ellie moved to Carroll Drive, so my mother would bake cookies for her, and my sister and I would stop and visit Aunt Ellie at Christmas. The first visit was at Christmas time, somewhere around 1995, I think. I was never close to anyone on that side of the family. I asked her if she knew how Uncle Jim died, and she went to her jewelry box and pulled out an old, dried-out envelope. During wars, most soldiers would exchange home addresses with their buddies so that they could tell family what really happened, since the Army's death notice had almost no information. I read the letter and I almost fainted. It was one of my dreams! Oh my God, how cool. It said the platoon stopped beside a building and they ordered Jim to take a walkie-talkie, move through clearing, and set up a gun position behind a tree on the other side of the clearing. In my dream, I was running bent over with a rifle in my right hand and something in my left hand, and about halfway across, my legs quit working and I went down on my face. In the letter, he described that and said a sniper shot me in the stomach. They tried to get me back, but the Germans opened up on them with a machine gun and they had to pull back. Jim was listed as missing in action for a few days before they were able to get the body. When I was born, I had a birthmark on my right side about the size of a strawberry and bright red. It gradually went away by the time I became a teenager. There was another letter in there and I asked her what that was. She said they wrote the GI who sent the letter about Jim to thank him for the information, but the letter was returned with KIA stamped on the envelope. Wait, KIA is killed in action, I think, right? Is that correct? The rest of my nightmares happened many years before World War II, and though I still have them occasionally, they don't seem to bother me as much as an adult. The human soul cannot exist in our dimension unless it is paired with a living creature, and when that creature dies, the soul is free to return to its point of origin. The soul can't be destroyed by anything existing in our dimension and is therefore immortal. Then there's a picture of a spotted horse and it says, "It doesn't have class unless it has spots on its ass. I'm assuming this is potentially part of the person's email signature because I don't think that has anything to do with the story. So if this is your story and you're seeing this, let me know. Oh my God, how freaking cool. You were literally having a dream about a past life of someone in your family, which is even wackier. It's actually not that wacky because I know that we have soul families and a lot of us stay together in multiple lives as different people, different relations to each other. But how cool. And the fact that you had a birthmark. You had a birthmark where the bullet wound was? If you didn't know, that's a very common thing too, that like your birthmarks and things that you have indicate how you died in past lives. Let me know if you maybe want me to do like a little video on like what could mean what. That's fun. This was so freaking cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
How do you explain something like this? One of my followers wrote into me and she would like to be referred to as Anna for the story. Anna says that something happened to her and her boyfriend 2 years ago, and it made her certain that alternate realities and parallel universes absolutely exist. So one summer afternoon, she and her boyfriend go grocery shopping, and they noticed a sale in the produce section of buy one, get one free containers of fresh watermelon. So obviously they get 2 containers of the fresh cut watermelon. She said they were in those little square plastic boxes that the fresh cut fruit comes in normally. It also makes note that there was a safety seal and a sticker or label that covered it so that you had to rip that open when getting into the container. Anna says that detail is important to remember for later. So Anna and her boyfriend get home and they immediately dig into one of those containers of watermelon. They removed the safety seal and sticker and they threw them away in the trash can. And then they made their way over to the couch where they sat together watching TV as they devoured this watermelon, as one would. Anna also says she remembers talking to her boyfriend about how sweet and fresh the watermelon was. She mentioned that they should probably slow down and not eat the whole container in one sitting because they just wanted to savor every bit of it as long as they possibly could. So they ate and ate until the container was about halfway gone. And then they decided to stop, close up the lid, and put it back into the refrigerator. And she said they set it inside right next to that other container that was still sealed. So a few hours later, Anna goes over to the refrigerator to open the door and look inside and start to decide what they're going to make for dinner that night. And to her surprise, what did she find? Both watermelon containers were sitting in there side by side, both completely sealed with the sticker and the safety seal. These containers were both completely full to the top, as though no one had eaten anything out of them. So Anna is in shock and she thinks, I must be losing my mind. So she calls her boyfriend into the kitchen to come and look at this. He then verified, no, you're not crazy. We 100% sat on that couch together and ate half a container of watermelon. They continued on talking about how they remembered talking about how delicious it was. And they even went as far as peeking inside the trash can, and guess what? There was no safety seal or label thrown away. Anna says that they kept going back and forth for a while about possible explanations because they are both very logical and skeptical people. But honestly, they couldn't come up with anything, especially because this deal was buy one, get one free. So they only purchased 2 containers. There would not have been a third. Plus, they only ate half the container when they put it back in the fridge. So there should be a container half full in there somewhere, but there wasn't. She says she and her boyfriend still bring it up all the time because it was the only thing like it that has ever happened to her and him in their lives. So Anna says, I have no explanation for what could have possibly happened, but I do have 3 possible theories. 1, time glitch. 2, alternate or parallel universe. Or 3, her grandmother. Anna says her grandmother had passed away about a month before this incident happened, and she was more like a mother to her. She raised her, and she was also like a best friend to her, and watermelon was one of her favorite snacks. Anna says, I don't know, it could have been one of the 3 or a combination. Or maybe there's a completely different explanation altogether, but she says she will probably spend the rest of her life wondering. She also says she knows that there is no way for her to prove this, but she 110% says this absolutely happened. She also says if it wasn't for the fact that her boyfriend was there with her as well, she would have probably gaslit herself into thinking that there was some other reasoning for it, or that it didn't happen at all. Anna says that this genuinely completely changed her whole perspective on reality and the universe. She also says that she is certain that there is probably so much that we will never be able to explain. All right, y'all, you know what to do. What are your thoughts? Please drop them in the comments. I know Anna will be in there reading them. And if you have your own glitch story, you gotta share it. If you're interested in Creepy Storytime merch, go check out that link in my bio. And if you're new here, you gotta follow for more Creepy Storytime.
Want to hear something scary? This is part 4 of my Appalachian Storytime series. This one I am actually filming in complete darkness at 11:31 at night. This is my room. Oh, it's so messy, actually, never mind. I was around 10 years old, and my parents would take us to the Macomb Lake I was around 10 years old, and my parents would take us to the Macomb Lake campgrounds to camp for the whole summer. The first night we were there, we had to set up camp, ate some food, and my parents had quite a lot to drink with their friends. So needless to say, by the time they came into the tent to sleep, they were passed out. We were sharing this one big tent, me, my parents, and my uncle. While I was laying there trying to fall asleep, I suddenly got an absolutely horrifying feeling. It came out of nowhere, and I felt freezing cold and completely panicked. Shortly after this feeling came on, I started hearing the sound of breaking sticks and panting slowly approaching the tent. At this point, I'm so scared that I'm paralyzed and can't even speak. I didn't even want to make any noise to wake up my parents, because I was terrified that this thing would try and come into the tent. This thing began walking around our tent. It was walking upright, like a human, with its body pushed up against the tent as it was circling around it, almost like it wanted me to see it and be aware of it. I was so scared for the first few hours that it was circling around the tent that it hadn't even registered in my mind that my uncle's window was unzipped, so I could see through it when it walked by and actually get a look at it. I ended up looking at it as it passed by my uncle's window, and what I saw was not normal. This thing looked like a pale, emancipated? This thing looked like a pale, emaciated humanoid monster. It didn't have hair on its head, and its eyes were black. This damn thing circled around the tent all night long until the sun came up, and it just left. I told my parents and uncle about it that morning, freaking out and shaking. They didn't take me seriously. Probably thought I just had a bad dream. But I know what a dream is, and I was up all night. Didn't sleep a wink, just shivering in terror over this thing all night. I was even so exhausted, I slept all day. So I highly doubt it was a bad dream, because clearly I hadn't slept if I was tired enough to sleep the entire day away the next morning. So what do you think? Do you believe this story?
Want to get creeped out? Many of you have been asking me to talk about the red door, yellow door ritual for a long time, so let's get into it. This is a ritual that is typically performed by two people, the traveler and the guide. The point of the ritual is for the traveler to learn something about themselves, find what's hidden within their own mind, or face something that they know is there but that they haven't been ready to face. This is essentially a guided meditation, but it has a history of basically turning into a psychological horror for a lot of people, and some people who have done the ritual have experienced some really scary things. In this video, we are going to get into how you do the ritual, and if you guys want to hear stories of people who have tried the ritual, let me know in the comments. Now, I will say, as I always say, I do not suggest trying this. Do not try this at home unless you are practiced in the occult and cleansing, in protection. When it comes to the spiritual realm, I would say don't dive in with rituals. Dive in with something that's lighter and, you know, something that's not going to potentially cause this psychological horror in your mind. Now, like I said, there is typically two people who do the ritual, the traveler and the guide, but you can do this ritual solo. However, I do not suggest it. Even more than I don't suggest doing the ritual at all, and I'll get into why later. The only thing you really need for the ritual is a dark, quiet room. However, it does say that these things are optional: a pillow, a timer or an alarm clock, and or a voice recorder to listen back afterwards. And this also says it's optional. However, I would say it shouldn't be optional. It's a cup of water to force stop the game, which we'll get into as well. It is said that they don't suggest doing this ritual for longer than an hour, and that is most likely because of the psychological horror that can go on in your mind while you're doing this. So first step, the traveler has to lay down and put their head in the guide's lap. Barf, that's so awkward. Right off the bat, that's a no for me. I'm not putting my head in anyone's lap, even with a pillow. I'm sorry. That's weird for me. Specific movements need to be done by the traveler to begin the ritual as well. They basically have to have their arms in the air and their eyes closed. The guide then places their fingers on the traveler's temple and moves them in a circular motion. Again, this is so awkward to me. I would die. I couldn't do this because I'm just too awkward. The traveler has their arms up in the air still. They're focusing on the guide, and the guide starts chanting red door, yellow door, any other color door. Now, the traveler keeps their arms up until they can't anymore, and they just will naturally start to lower on their own. Once their arms are down, the guide can move on to the next step, and the point of the guide is to guide the traveler. Duh. Hello, I'm sure we all knew that. But they also, I guess, keep track of the traveler's journey, and they start this by asking the traveler what they see. Now, the traveler should describe what they see in as much detail as possible. If they see doors, describe what the doors look like, what they're made out of, what the handle looks like, how the door makes them feel, what color it is. If the doors are in a hallway, same thing. Describe everything. The guide can also remind them by asking them questions like, how do you feel about this door? And also, do you want to go through this door? The traveler essentially explores and goes through the doors as they wish and explore the doors of their mind, which is another name for this ritual, or at least it's a very similar ritual. The traveler should bear in mind to pay attention to everything: visuals, scents, noises, senses, feelings. Describe all of it to the guide, and the guide may ask you questions. Elaborate as much as possible. This includes when a traveler enters into a room. What do the walls look like? What texture are they? What does the ceiling look like? What's in the room? What does it smell like? You get the picture. Now, here are the warnings to this ritual, which are what to me make it really eerie right off the bat. If you start the ritual and the traveler sees no doors, do not proceed with the ritual. If the traveler sees a man in a suit, they should ask the guide to end the ritual immediately. The traveler should not open any doors that are stuck, locked, or locked unless they have the key to the door. The traveler should not go down any stairs, only up, and the only time they should be going down the stairs is to come back down from the stairs that they went up, if that makes sense. Same with elevators. It's okay to go up. It's not okay to go down unless you're returning from the way you came. The traveler should let the guide know immediately if they encounter a trap or if they are stuck somewhere, meaning they can't move forward, backwards. And at that point, the guide should execute the emergency ending of the ritual, which includes that cup of water. If the guide has any sense that the traveler wishes to end the ritual or it seems like they're in danger, they should also end the ritual. If the traveler describes stairs that lead downwards, the sound of ticking clocks, or opens a door to a room full of clocks, the guide should end the ritual. If the traveler hears the sound of rushing water or a door behind which they believe there is rushing water, the guide should end the ritual. And if the traveler encounters any people at all, the guide should end the ritual, but even more so if it is the man in a suit, which we discussed earlier, or an elderly woman, possibly in a Victorian dress. Let me tell you, I would want to talk to her for sure. I would not want to end the ritual, but it says you have to. Now, how does the guide bring the traveler back to this reality to get them out of their mind, get them out of this guided meditation? The traveler starts going back to the point which they started the ritual. They should also be closing any doors that they opened along the way. However, this step can be skipped if the guide is needing to do an emergency ending to the ritual. The guide will tell the traveler to open their eyes when they reach 1, and then they count down from 5 to 1. To end the ritual in a case of emergency, the guide throws a cup of water on the traveler's face. Probably pretty obvious. There is no doubt in my mind that things can get pretty freaky in someone's brain. I'm speaking from experience. However, this ritual doesn't sound too bad to me, other than the fact that I'd have to put my head in someone's lap and they'd have to rub my temples. It's just weird for me. I don't like it. And by the way, if you didn't know, my name is Megan. I'm a paranormal researcher and investigator, as well as a folklore researcher, and I love bringing spooky content to you.
In my little creeps, because tonight I have a story about a shapeshifter for you. This came from Heather from Brown County, Indiana, and she says she believes her mom actually dated a shapeshifter. And maybe there's a perfectly logical and normal explanation for this, or maybe there really was a supernatural element going on, but either way, I think it's a good story. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest and most unsettling things that people have ever experienced. Heather says she already knows how this is going to sound. It sounds absolutely crazy, but she needs to tell someone about it and she wants to hear what you all think. So when she was 16, she was working at a feed store just outside of the town where she lived, and this older man would come in every couple weeks to buy chicken feed and fencing supplies and mineral blocks, and he was probably mid to late 50s. She calls him Mike for this story, by the way. And he was very nice. He kept to himself and he always paid in cash. And most of the people in the town knew him, but they didn't know a lot about him. As far as anyone knew, he was born and raised in the town. He was from there and he just liked to keep to himself. So that's all fine and good. One day her mom comes into the store to pick her up. She's getting off of her shift and her mom meets Mike. Heather describes her mom as a very kind and lovely woman, but she always worked very hard because she was a single parent for most of Heather's life. Heather and her mom didn't come from money, and so her mom always had to work very hard, and thus she didn't spend a lot of time dating as Heather grew up. But she and Mike got to talking as she was waiting for Heather to get off her shift, and they ended up hitting it off. Mike asked Heather's mom out on a date, and she said yes, and they went out, and they continued going out for a few months until they were dating for about a year, and Mike suggested that both Heather and her mom move in with him. Everything had been going good in their relationship up until this point, and Heather and her mom were excited at this opportunity because they lived with Heather's grandmother, and the house was pretty small. They lived in an older but bigger house that she described as sort of log cabin-esque. It was set back in the woods on about 40 acres, and there was a small clearing where the house was, as well as an old barn. There was also a large chicken coop, an area where he kept goats, and enough trees surrounding the property that you couldn't see any neighbors' houses. Heather said it was an absolutely beautiful property during the day, but at first it took some getting used to at night because it was so dark out there. They moved in and they both really liked it at first. Heather enjoyed having more space to sort of roam and just clear her head, and her mom liked it because Mike bought them both their own chickens and ducks upon moving in. Doesn't like baby animals, right? And Mike also fixed up the house to make it more cozy because initially when they moved in, she described it as sort of a bachelor pad. He didn't really have any matching furniture or anything that made women feel comfortable. So he went out of his way to fix up some old things in the house, and he allowed both Heather and her mom to decorate it as they deemed appropriate. Heather says she did really like Mike. He was the type of person to go out even in the middle of the night to help a neighbor if one of their animals got loose, which actually she noticed actually happened kind of a lot. Sometimes if she was up early for school or getting ready to go to work on the weekend, he would come walking in around 6 in the morning and she would say, "Where were you?" And he would say, "Oh, I was helping so-and-so find their lost goat." That's cool. That's fine. That's just the type of person she guessed he was. But then one night her mom woke her up a few months after living there and she said, "Heather, I need you to wake up. Do you know anything about what Mike does at night?" And Heather said, "No, what are you talking about?" She said, "Well, I didn't want to stress you out, but I think he's cheating on me." This came as a shock to Heather because Mike did not seem like the type of person to cheat. He didn't even seem to have any friends as it was. And so she said, "Well, what makes you think that?" And her mom said, "Well, I keep waking up in the middle of the night and he's not here." Heather's like, "What do you mean he's not here?" And the mom says, "Well, his truck's always here, but he just disappears in the middle of the night and I have no idea where he goes." And so Heather says, "I think you should just ask him about it. Like, he really doesn't seem like the type." She meant it. There was really nowhere for him to go anyway. And so the next morning when Mike was sitting at the kitchen table having his coffee, her mom walked in the room and she said, "Mike, where do you go at night? I've noticed a few times over the last few months that I've woken up in the middle of the night and your truck is here, but you aren't. So where do you go?" And he barely looked up from his coffee and he just said, "I walk." And she says, "At 2 in the morning?" And he says, "Yeah, I've never really been a good sleeper." So Heather's mom says, "Well, where do you walk?" And he says, "The woods." So that was the answer. And they both just sort of accepted it because he hadn't given them a reason not to trust him anyway. But then Heather started paying attention and she said she noticed a strange pattern. This continued for several months where he would be up and out in the middle of the night and neither of them would wake up when he left, but sometimes they would wake up when he was coming back in, and it was usually between the hours of like 4 and 6 a.m. Then one night, about a year after they first moved into Mike's house, Heather says she got home around midnight after hanging out with some friends, and she had gotten dropped off at the start of their long gravel driveway. And she was walking up to the house, and it was so dark that she was using her phone's flashlight. At the corner of her eye, near the edge of the house, she caught a glimpse of something, and it seemed to have two eyes that reflected the light. And so she shined the light, and she saw what looked to be a very, very large coyote. It wasn't walking or moving in a hurried pace, but it just seemed to be headed somewhere with intent and purpose. And so she got nervous because she thought that it was headed toward the chicken coop and the goat pen. She panicked because some of those chickens and the ducks back there were basically her and her mom's babies. She followed it around the side of the house, and she said she wasn't scared because she had been around coyotes before, and this didn't seem aggressive. It didn't seem even scared. So she started walking around the side of the house, and she got to where the chicken coop was, and she noticed that every chicken in the coop was asleep. There was no alarm call, not even a single bird moving. And so she swung her flashlight around, and she was looking for the coyote, but it was just gone. She stood out there for a few minutes, and she sort of looked around for tracks because she wanted to make sure that the coyote had left. She didn't find any tracks or anything to indicate that it was still in the area, and so reluctantly she went back in the house, and her mom was actually still awake sitting at the kitchen table. Her mom looks at her and she's like, "Is everything okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I just thought I saw a coyote back by the chicken coop." She's like, "It's fine, I think it left. Like, why are you still awake?" Because she noticed that her mom looked tired, and her mom was like, "Oh, I went to bed at like 8 o'clock, but I woke up and he's out walking again." Heather's like, what? And her mom's like, yeah, he left about like 20 minutes ago. I heard the back door close. Her mom's like, I don't know what it is. I just feel like something's off. And then when she said that, Heather said this like very strange feeling washed over her because she just felt like something was off with the timing. Then about a month after that, something happened that she said still sort of makes her sick to think about. So they had gone to this local community festival. It was about 30 minutes away from where they lived, and there was like a bunch of vendors and local businesses there, and there were some bands playing, and it was just a really great time when everyone in the area got together. Heather and her mom ended up running into some people that they hadn't seen in a long time, and they got to talking, and they ended up staying at the festival later than they intended. And Mike was getting increasingly frustrated that they were there. As the moon came out into full view, he kept looking at the sky, he kept checking his watch, and he kept indicating that he was ready to leave. Finally, around 10:30 p.m., he stood up from where he was sitting and he was like, we need to get home now. Heather's mom just sort of laughed and she was like, no, it's fine. We're all catching up. We never stay out late. Let's just hang out. Let's have a good time. Everything is fine. And he's like, you know what? No, I don't feel good. I think I got food poisoning from one of the vendors. I'm ready to go. But I really don't feel well. We all need to leave. Like, let's go. I'm going to go get the truck. And Heather's like, no, like if you're sick, then you go. I'm having a good time. Me and Heather are going to stay. Heather and her mom's family friends were like, it's fine. If you're not feeling well, just go. We'll drive them home in a little bit. Like, feel better soon. And within 2 minutes, he was gone. Heather's mom made a comment about how she thought that he was being dramatic. And also keep in mind, this was a man that dried his own venison jerky. He was not the type of man to complain about an upset tummy, but they said, whatever, it is what it is. And a few hours later, their friends drove them home. They got back. It was around 1 a.m. and Mike's truck was in the driveway, but every light in the house was off and they thought he was in bed. Heather went to her room, her mom went to their room, but a few minutes later she came to Heather's room and she said, he's gone. They checked the door and his boots were gone, and Heather's mom was furious. So she waited up, and around 3:30 in the morning the back door opened and Mike walked in, and he was completely covered in dirt and mud. He had leaves in his hair, clothes were soaked, and on the top of his left shoulder was a horrible, gaping, nasty wound. Heather's mom jumped up and she goes, oh my God, what happened? And he said, I slipped climbing over an old barbed wire fence in the woods. And Heather's mom is like, at 3 a.m? And he said, yeah, I just needed air. And so she grabs him and she looks closer. The edges of the wound were already blackened and sort of scabbed over. The puncture itself was almost perfectly round, as if something had gone into him instead of sliced him. He wanted to take him to the ER, but he absolutely refused. And by morning, he had stitched it himself. He just said that doctors were a waste of time, and Heather's mom was pretty mad about this and concerned that he was going to get an infection. But around noon that day, a neighbor pulled up on his side-by-side, which I looked it up, and it looks like that seems to be some type of four-wheeler. He comes up to the house and he knocks, and he looks shaken when they answer the door, and he's like, hey, I just came to warn y'all, like, you guys better keep your animals locked up, because last night I saw the biggest gray wolf I've ever seen stalking across my property. Said it was around 3 a.m. I'd been up drinking after I came home from that festival. I was sitting on my back porch and I took a shot at it. He goes, it's crazy because gray wolves aren't in southern Indiana, but he says, I know for a fact I hit it right here, but I tried to track it. I couldn't find it. Neighbor says, I watched it stumble into the trees. I know for a fact I hit it in the shoulder, and I followed it into the tree line thinking I would find it about 50 yards in, but I know it's still out there because I didn't find the body. Said, so I just figured I'd come over and warn y'all and tell y'all to keep an eye on your animals. And at this point, Mike had walked into the room, and Heather said she stole a glance at him, and he was sort of standing with his hand underneath his flannel with his palm across the bandaged shoulder. As he listened to the neighbor, his expression never changed, but after the neighbor was done talking, he simply thanked him and wished him a good day. Heather says it wasn't long after the neighbor had come to their property to warn them about the wolf that she found enormous canine prints around the chicken coop in their yard. They were far larger than any coyote print she had ever seen, but oddly, every few feet they were smeared, as if whatever had made them had changed the way that it was walking. They followed them toward the tree line, but by the time they reached the woods, there were no more tracks to follow. Even stranger, their chickens were never harmed, their goats were never harmed, their ducks were never harmed. They never lost a single animal in the entire time they lived there, despite very evident canine activity around their property and the neighbors constantly complaining about sightings of a gray wolf. Mike never stopped walking at night, and that's actually the reason that Heather's mom and him eventually broke up. She said that she couldn't get over this inability to trust him. She said she never got over the feeling that he was hiding something despite not knowing what it was. He ended up moving back in with Heather's grandmother, and she hadn't seen him since, but a few years later she was in the area and she decided to drive past the property. The house was empty with all the lights off, and she noticed the barn was collapsing, and so she drove a little further ways down the road and she saw a neighbor outside, and so she pulled off to ask about Mike. Neighbor actually laughed and said, yeah, he was actually the strangest man I've ever met in my life. But yeah, he passed away a few years ago. Apparently found him in the woods, and it looked like he had been out there for a while and succumbed to the conditions of nature, but there was no foul play involved, and authorities had ruled it simply an accident. But Heather says she still wonders about it. Maybe there really was a logical explanation, and the wound really was from a barbed wire fence, and maybe he really did like taking long walks in the middle of the night. Or maybe some of the oldest stories exist because sometimes people have seen things that they're not supposed to. Says she truly doesn't know what Mike really was, but she does know that a lot of the nights he disappeared were on full moons. Heather is her real name. She will be reading the comments. Drop your thoughts and theories. I would love to read through them. And if you have a spooky, scary story time of your own, we would love to hear it.
My daughter told me there's been people who come to visit her every night since we moved in. They told her they don't like us and want us out the house. Hey y'all. So this is Last Thread Before Bed, episode 16. This is a series where I read scary stories from Reddit and I try not to get nightmares. So boom, let's get into it. So this is from subreddit, Short Scary Stories. And this story is from The White Peanut and it's called Did You Sell Me a Haunted House? I moved in with Dad, who lived in White Center, Washington when I was 15. The house had 6 floors technically, although the staircases led to each floor was only about 9 or 10 steps. The house's layout was a maze of staircases leading in and out of each floor with large windows in almost every room, including the basement. My brothers and I have had numerous paranormal experiences in this house, and they even told me about some before I even moved in, which sent shivers down my spine. My dad never believed in ghosts, and whenever my brothers and I would explain what happened while he was at work, he would say, "It's all in your heads, the house is not haunted." Even after my stepmom went to a psychic who knew nothing of the house and stopped her session short to tell her, "Get out of your house, there's bad energy there," he still denies everything. It wasn't until we finally moved out of that house that we finally had to face the facts. He sold the house to an employee of his name, Catherine, who had just married and was looking for a house for her husband and daughter that was closer to work. A few weeks after, Catherine rushes into my dad's office and closes the door. "Excuse me, John, did you sell me a haunted house?" she asks. "Don't be ridiculous, Catherine. There's no such thing as ghosts," he replied. "My daughter told me there's been people who come to visit her every night since we moved in. They told her they don't like us and want us out the house," she explains while half crying. "No, our house is not haunted, though. Not haunted at all." Catherine and her family moved out of the house soon after. My dad still says he doesn't believe in ghosts, but when my brothers and I tell him about stories and experiences we have had there, he quickly changes the subject. That was a short one, but it was pretty good. Follow for more scary stories. Good night.
Apparently, lugauts and sukuyants are everywhere. I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted this story Matipa. After years of Matipa looking for a job, she came across a post that said, "Teach English in China." She started looking into it and eventually got a job in mainland China. She traveled there, met her colleagues, and was given an apartment on the 31st floor. However, remember this is going to be important for later, Matipa noticed one of her colleagues, Pinky. Pinky was not happy about her being there, but Matipa brushed it off. Pinky later became a close friend of hers. Coincidentally, they lived in the same building, just on different floors. A few days later, Matipa started having numb hands, and they would feel swollen, but she thought it's probably because she had been typing for hours on the computer. Fast forward to one night, Matipa was relaxing in bed, and there were these clerestory windows near it, and she would just switch the lights off to admire the city lights and the skyscrapers before she goes to sleep. Well, as she started drifting off, she says, whoosh! A huge, human-sized bird flew past. That was strange. She said it was such a big bird. And it's weird because she hadn't seen any birds in the city. She just went to sleep. In her sleep, she heard a voice that said, "I saw that too. That was not a bird. That was a human being. Here, witches are good at flying. Be careful." In China? I'm sorry. Matipa says she was shocked, not knowing that there was more yet to come. So one time, she suddenly gets really sick. She had this non-stop cough and had to take a day off from work. The next day, she returned to work and Pinky was the first one to approach her to tell her how worried she was. And she had this like concoction of herbs. It was like mixed spices, star anise, etc. They said that it would help her with her sickness. Now, Matipa is Christian, so she wasn't gonna use them herbs anyway, but she took them because she wasn't trying to be rude in front of everybody. So Matipa gets back to her apartment and placed the dish
dish of spices on the table next to the front door. She went about her evening, showered, ate, then laid in bed scrolling on her phone and eventually dozed off. And she started having a dream. Like Martin Luther King. I'm really sorry. She started having a dream of someone short with a small voice that sounded like a child knocking on her door. So she stood up to open it, and suddenly she gets woken up by this freezing cold feeling in her hand. Her hands were on the steel door handle. Matipa realized that she had been sleepwalking. What stopped her from opening the door is that she had double locked it. Since it was winter, the door handle was ice cold. Mind you, she is not someone who sleepwalks. That's when she decided that after that contract ended, she was leaving that job before she lost her life. But before leaving, a new colleague who was supposed to replace her started going in and out of the hospital because of swollen hands. Matipa moved, got a new job and a bigger apartment. On the first night, she knelt down to pray in front of her bed. From the corner of her eye, she could see into the living room, and as soon as she said amen, she saw a spitter patter. Something that looked like a small chick, and it gave her an angry side eye. Matipa is perplexed. She gets up to go get a closer look. Chick is gone. Nothing. It was to the point where she thought maybe she had PTSD from her previous apartment. Mind you, this apartment was provided by the school. This new school was in a third-tier city, and Matipa thought, let me move away from the big city and its problems. The school was great, this new school she's in. The people were nice and the kids were friendly. So in that school, they used to give her a 2-hour break because children took nap. One day, she decided to take a nap in the office. Weirdly, another foreign teacher had recently left. He told her that the principal there was such an evil person. So she was left alone in the foreign teacher's office. The office had both a front and back door. One day, she left the back door open because it overlooked the garden, and she started feeling sleepy again. Remember that freaking chick? It was back because this unknown creature just passed by again and then vanished right before her eyes. It wasn't really a real chick. It was something dark. It felt evil. And at that moment, Matipa knew that she had gotten herself into something deeper and darker. Eventually, she left that school altogether because she couldn't rest. At night, she felt like she had a spiritual husband. She would wake up feeling suffocated in the house. Sometimes even prayer did not help. She fell into a really bad depression and eventually had to go through a very, very difficult spiritual cleansing back home. So she left China. She chose peace. The last thing she said was she thinks the school was led by some sort of cult, because at the time she could understand a little bit of Chinese, and in ceremonies there were weird things happening in chants. She could tell those chants were not in Chinese. Thank you guys so much for watching this spooky story. Make sure you follow me for more spooky content from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
Have you ever heard a whistle in the woods that made you think you were going crazy? The type of whistle that you've heard a lot of folklore about, but then you're also contemplating on whether this is a bird or not, and your friends think you're going nuts. So I'm going to tell you a story of me and my cousins when we went hiking down in the Appalachia, and we thought we were hearing either mourning doves or just some kind of animal. By the way, I always let girls know when I'm wearing a filter because don't ever compare yourself. I'm wearing a filter. So anyway, it was like a normal summer day, and me and my cousins, we decided to take a regular day hike, right? And we didn't think anything of this day hike because we're going in the middle of the day. So like, you know, what could happen in the daytime? We hike about 2.5 miles into the woods because our goal was to get to the other side of this lake. And mind you, we loved hearing the sounds of animals, the sounds of nature. I mean, who doesn't? That was until we put our towels down by the beach and we all started going swimming, and we heard what we thought was on the other side of the beach we were on. We heard the sound of a strange like whistle / humming kind of noise. At first, again, we thought it was like a mourning dove or something, until the pattern kept continuing. Eerie feeling about this thing was that it kept continuing in a sense of, you can tell that it wanted us to be curious. Us being typical white people, of course we were curious, and we decided to walk towards this noise because yeah, crazy white people. That was when we started walking towards this noise, it kept getting louder and louder, and we couldn't tell if we were hearing it right there in the woods or if it was starting to get closer to us. Weirdest thing was that this noise kind of sounded like a mourning dove, but it was like a woo woo woo. The crazy thing was we couldn't see any mourning doves or any nests or any animals around, but when we started to get closer to the wood line, every sound of an animal got quiet. Crickets and everything, and you know that when the woods get quiet, something is wrong and you're not alone. All I can tell you is that we started to investigate a little more. We didn't walk any closer to the woods, but we stood there and we stayed real quiet, and we started to hear anything more, if we could hear anything more in the woods. And as quiet as the nature was, what we did hear was something huge. I don't know what it was, but it was huge. Logs and sticks sounded like they were breaking as this thing took off into the woods. But we couldn't see anything. We could only hear it running away. I know the traditional folklore goes, you know, you hear a lot of stuff out in the woods. No, you didn't. If you guys have any similar stories, please put them down in the comments. I would love to read them, and follow for more crazy stories in my life.
I think I stumbled across a gate at the airport that didn't exist. Hi everyone, welcome back to Candlelit Whispers with Amanda. Today I have an interesting submitted story about a creepy airport encounter. I sent this in the hopes of finding out what happened to me a few months ago at the airport. I travel for work a lot, and 6 months ago I experienced something I can't explain. My flight had been delayed due to a thunderstorm. It was late and most of the terminal was empty. I got bored, so I decided to walk around to kill some time. As I walked, I noticed there was a sign for Gate 49. That struck me as odd because I thought this airport only had 48 gates. I decided to walk down and check it out. When I walked to the gate, there was a waiting area. 20 people were sitting there. Nobody was talking, nobody was looking at their phones, and I thought that was way too quiet. Airports are usually noisy, and at the gate desk sat a woman in an airline uniform. She looked pretty normal, but not moving. Behind her was the departure board. There was no destination, only a flight number, and it was on time. I asked one of the people where they were going, but nobody answered. Everyone just looked at me with no reaction. I apologized and started walking back very slowly. Still, nobody said a word. The moment I reached the main terminal, all of the airport noises flooded back. Announcements, rolling suitcases, and people talking. The next day, as I was waiting for my rescheduled flight, I asked an airport employee where Gate 49 was, and he looked at me confused and told me there was no Gate 49. He asked me to show him, but when I retraced my steps, there was only a blank wall. To this day, I still can't comprehend what happened to me at the airport. Wow, I would definitely feel like I'm going crazy if I know that I saw another terminal or another gate, but then the next day when I came back from my rescheduled flight, it wasn't there. Has anything like this ever happened to you at an airport? Leave your story in the comments below.
There's a particular set of rules that they say to follow if you ever encounter the paranormal. Like, for instance, if someone knocks on your door after midnight, you do not answer it. If the phone rings after midnight, you're not supposed to answer it. If something calls your name, it's said that if you respond, it could possess you. If you go to a funeral, and when you're leaving, you should never look back until you get home. If you were in a cemetery, and you should never step on the gravestones or in front of them. Also, if you're at a cemetery, when you drive past the cemetery gates, you should hold your breath. And when you leave a cemetery, always check your back seat. Now, when you're at home, you should never have a mirror facing the bed. And you should never have two mirrors facing each other. It's also said that you should never, ever name a spirit in your home. You should never try and communicate with it, and you should never acknowledge it. So what do you think? What rules have you heard to protect yourself or keep yourself safe from the paranormal?
This story was sent to me by a follower, and it covers about a year's worth of terrifying experiences that she had endured. She had asked me not to use her real name, so we're going to call her Addie, and she swears that every word of this is true. And after hearing what happened, I don't blame her, and I can fully understand why she never wants to go back to that house again. So about 15 years ago, she moved into an old house just on the outskirts of Kerman, California. And it sat on 2 acres with a pool, and it looked really, really nice, and she said it was pretty much her dream home. And the first night that they stayed there, she and a friend found something hanging on the front door. And it wasn't a welcome sign, it was actually a Catholic prayer written in Spanish meant to protect the house from demons. And her friend read it out loud, and both of them immediately got the chills after listening to it. Then her boyfriend casually mentioned that locals believe that that exact house was haunted because no family ever stayed there pretty much longer than a year. And the next day, his mother threw the prayer away that was on the front door. And that's when everything began to change. So it started with footsteps, small things, almost every single night they would hear what sounded like children running up and down the kitchen. But every time that they would check, there would be nobody there. Then began the feeling of this dread and everything feeling different. She was pregnant at the time, and she said that the house filled her thoughts with things that she didn't feel like they were her own, right? She became so disturbed that she actually was considering checking herself into a psychiatric facility. And one afternoon, while cleaning the house, she looked up and found what appeared to be dried red stuff splattered across the ceiling fan. And soon after, the entire family became constantly angry and in constant turmoil. Every little thing turned into a fight, almost as if the house wanted them to hate one another and it was turning them against each other. Then one of their pit bulls vanished inside the house, and after searching everywhere, they actually found him hiding in the garage, wedged into a tiny corner, shaking so violently that he could barely stand. And no one was home at the time that this happened, so they were wondering what could have caused him to do this, because this was very, very unlike him. Now, months later, a family member had passed, and they actually passed away in a very bad car accident, sadly. And while everyone sat in mourning, an old computer monitor suddenly turned itself on, and the screen had displayed a photograph of the man that had just passed away, and that wasn't the screensaver. Nobody bumped into the computer or touched the mouse or anything. And after her son was born, things became even more terrifying. She kept dreaming about a mule with glowing red eyes that was always watching her. And one day she laid her baby down for a nap and she walked into the kitchen. Seconds later, she heard a loud crash and her baby started screaming, and she heard it through the monitor. So she sprinted up the stairs and she found her plugged-in hair straightener lying on the floor beside the crib, as if something had violently thrown it toward her son. Then became the moments that still haunt her to this very day. During a party, she invited a quiet girl over from school that she had barely known, but she was starting to become friends with, and the girl walked into the bedroom. She froze and she stared silently into the corner above the baby's crib before she decided that she was leaving. The following Monday, she pulled her aside at school and she said to my follower, "I don't usually tell people this, but I'm very sensitive to things that most people can't see." And then she said something that made her blood run cold. "There is something standing over your son's crib, and it is very angry, and it does not like you. And there's another spirit that's trying to protect you and your family inside of the house, but unfortunately, it's losing the battle." She had never told this girl about anything that was happening inside the house, and that same evening, her 1-year-old nephew wandered into that bedroom, looked toward that exact same corner, and suddenly started screaming, hysterically crying, before running out. He refused to ever enter that room again, and they actually had a hard time getting him just to come to the house in general. Now, being very, very desperate, her father gave her a blessed Native American medicine bag and taught her a prayer to cleanse the home. And as she walked room to room praying, two skeptical relatives that were sitting downstairs inside the kitchen were actually laughing about it and making fun of her. Then, all three of them heard this front door slam, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The men sprinted outside into an absolute panic, and they told her that they had just watched a very tall man dressed completely in black walk silently through the living room to the front door before slamming it shut 3 times, and all of them heard and saw the exact same thing. Neither of them stepped foot inside that house again, and the family moved out before living there for a full year, just like every family before them. But according to her, whatever was inside never stayed behind. Months later, a friend visiting their new apartment kept asking why a very tall man dressed in black was walking up and down their hallway. And this was years after that. And one night she woke up, unable to move, and she said it felt like something was pulling the blanket over her face, trying to suffocate her, is what she described it as. And it only stopped after she managed to whisper the name of Jesus and she asked for help. Now, to this very day, she doesn't know if that thing lived in the house or if it followed her home. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, or if you have experienced anything like this.
My parents divorced in my very early teens, and my mom now had 5 kids to take care of all by herself without the help of her ex. We moved into my grandma's house. She recently passed away, and so the house was vacant. Not long after that, my mom actually got remarried, and he brought along 5 kids, and we all instantly got along. We loved it. But now there's nearly about a dozen of us crammed into this tiny house. The boys had to stay downstairs in this house, which was unfinished. There was exposed studs, concrete floors. Down there was also like an old potato cellar. You could lock it from the outside, and when you got into it, it just had like a single bulb light hanging from the ceiling, and it was one of the ones that had just like a chain that you'd pull to turn it on. So the small room had dirt floors. We would just keep it for storage that we didn't need to get into very often, right? But we always joked about how creepy it was. One day came where we wanted to mess with one of our little brothers, and so we asked him to go get something in the small room, and when he got in there, we locked him in there. And at first, he was just like, very funny, guys, like, whatever, let me out. And of course, as older siblings, we did not let him out, we kept him in there. He then started to panic, he started to cry, and he was banging on the door, which we thought was funny at first, but, you know, immediately we opened the door, and we're like, we were just trying to tease you, like, this was just a joke, and he was very upset, like, he wouldn't talk to us for a minute. Later on, he actually told us that the light switched off and then on and then off again, and it would not switch back on until right before we opened up the door. Super creepy, but we did try to make him feel better by saying the house was old, like it had some electrical issues, don't worry about it. Sure enough, there's other occurrences that happened down there where the light would flicker on and off on its own, or you'd hear a door open and close on its own. We would always try to make up some kind of logical explanation for it, even though we all probably knew in the back of our minds that it was something haunted. That wasn't the end of it. There was one night where I was reading a book, and I loved to read when I was younger. I got so enthralled in my books. Aggressively, I had like a tug on my hair, and it pulled me back, and when I looked behind me, there was a pair of scissors at eye level. And I immediately looked at my brothers in the kitchen, and I said to them, "Did one of you just cut my hair?" And they looked at me, and I could tell that they were actually confused. They're like, "No, we didn't cut your hair, we're way over here." It didn't sound like they were messing with me, but I still asked, like, "Are you messing with me? Because what the heck?" And they just kept telling me no, and I was like, okay, all right, maybe it was nothing, maybe, like, my head knocked something and the scissors fell. I don't know. And my brother said, yeah, that sounds believable. And it's like we both kind of knew that it was something maybe supernatural that happened again. But that was the first time we had something like that happen upstairs. One of the last things that I'm going to talk about is my brother was doing dishes, and he was loading and unloading the dishwasher. He said that he was humming, and he felt like a scratch on his back. And at first it was just kind of light, like a tickle. And then another one happened, and it was hard, like it kind of hurt. He turned around and he said that he literally saw a knife fall from midair. Mind you, he was home alone. Obviously he felt panic settle into his body, and so he ran out of the house to call his stepdad. His stepdad came to check out the house, and immediately the stepdad said that he could feel something was wrong in the house, and they went down to the basement, and that's when things got very heavy and very dark. He said once he got down there, he got chills up and down his spine and the hairs raised on his arms. He said in the doorway of their half-built, unfinished basement was a dark figure looming. He had to actually cast him out and bless the house. Who knows what we really truly saw that day? All I know is after the house was blessed, the lights never flickered on and off again.
You're probably aware that America is turning 250 years old this weekend, but you might not know that for 200 of those years, 10 bodies were hidden under a founding father's house. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time, history edition. So this is Benjamin Franklin. You most likely know him as the kite and key guy or the guy on your $100 bill. But chances are what I'm about to tell you had no idea about. 1757, Benjamin Franklin gets sent over to London by Pennsylvania to try to settle a tax dispute. He was trying to get things to calm down so that no war broke out, which didn't work, obviously. 16 of the 18 years he's staying at this place, which is 36 Craven Street. Fun fact, it's the only home of Ben Franklin's left, like anywhere. Jump forward to 1998, they're doing construction on this place, and the guys are in the basement digging around, and they're like, hey, what's this? What's sticking out of the floor? Turns out it was a thigh bone. So immediately they call the coroner, because why wouldn't they? Then they keep going, and they end up finding 1,200 pieces of bone belonging to 10 different people, including 6 children. Right now you're thinking, how did that happen? How did all of those people end up in the basement of Ben Franklin's house? Well, you weren't the only one. Everyone wanted to know. Historians believe the most likely explanation goes to this guy, Dr. William Hewson, which was Ben Franklin's really good friend, who just happened to be this really well-known, famous anatomist who had an anatomy school on the property. That is so hard to say, oh my God. But there was a law in the 1700s that you could not dissect any body unless it was an executed criminal. So the medical school was needing bodies. They were hard to find, so he turned to grave robbers to get the bodies, and that's how the bodies got down there, because after he dissected them, he had nowhere to put them, so he put them in the floor, which is a theory. You might be thinking, that's horrible. How did he get away with this? Well, he didn't, because while he was doing all of this, he cut his finger during a dissection, he got an infection, and died in 3 days. So yeah, that happened. 1775, Ben ends up leaving to go back to America because he had this big humiliation confrontation with the English government, and he couldn't stay there anymore, so he left. A year later, he's working on the Declaration of Independence, and the rest is history. Happy 4th of July.
Want to hear something scary? Have you ever played the game Baby Blue? No? Me neither. Want to play it? I literally don't even have a funny intro for this one. If you want to roleplay as a Victorian peasant getting an abortion, this game is for you. To begin this game, you need only a bathroom with a mirror and yourself. Go into the bathroom alone and turn off all the lights, and then lock the door. Look into the mirror and hold out your arms as if you were rocking a baby, and say, "Baby Blue, Blue Baby," 13 times without stopping. If done correctly, you will feel the weight of an invisible baby in your arms. As the baby grows, the baby will become heavier and heavier, and it may even scratch your arms. When this begins to happen, you must drop the baby in the toilet and flush it before it becomes too heavy. Okay, one thing I always wonder with these is how did anybody find this ritual out? Were they rocking their pretend baby in the bathroom in pitch black darkness and suddenly feel scratching? How did they know to throw it in the toilet? I mean, low-key, I probably would have done the same thing, actually, so I'll just shut up. To end, you need to exit the bathroom. If you do not do it fast enough, a woman will appear in the mirror and yell at you to return her baby, and her deafening screams may break the glass. She may try to scratch you or pull you back into the mirror, but do not allow her. Just turn on the lights and exit the bathroom, closing the door behind you. So although I am not brave enough to play this game, who knows, maybe you are. Good luck.
The Curse of Immortality. The year was 2050, and I still vividly remember the big news being announced. An interdisciplinary team of researchers had discovered, quite by accident, the secret to immortality. Not simply biological immortality, because with the right chemical concoction, we could opt to become literally incapable of death. The world rejoiced, to think that we would never have to watch ourselves or our loved ones grow old and die. I mean, mourning would just become a thing of the past. Some concerns were raised, of course. A few suggested that boredom would be inevitable. The response was that these aren't the sort of people you'd want to invite to a party. I mean, besides, immortality would not be irreversible. It would be possible to live a long and youthful life, returning to mortal status if and when desired with a simple injection. Others were worried about how population sizes would be affected. To that end, a democratic, and it was agreed, fair solution was reached, whereby anyone who wished to have children could do so, up to a maximum of 2, only if they surrendered their own immortality. Access to immortality was a more realistic concern, but we managed to overcome that too. The cost quickly decreased. Moreover, it would soon become free at the point of access, worldwide. Things seem close to perfect, but with humans, they can never be so. The problem started when people realized you could use someone's immortality against them. Torture could occur unabated without release. No risk of death, bringing mercy to the victims. Every sick, cruel fantasy could be utilized to the full extent possible. So, stories surface of individuals being locked in basements, punished for decades, or continued, but the goal was not to kill, for, that's practically impossible. Instead, it was to inflict the highest degree of suffering. So something that was once thought as a step closer to heaven has, for many, become hell on earth.
A series of spooky stories except for its women's intuition. I was very close with my granddad growing up, and he passed away when I was 14. The same night that he died, I had a dream of him walking down a road and telling me that he loved me, and I told him that I loved him too. Then I asked where he was going, and he told me that he had to get down the road, but he would see me soon. I woke up from that dream to the sound of my mom coming down the hallway crying on the phone with my grandma. It freaked her out when she opened the door, and I told her I already know. Fast forward, and I'm pregnant with my first son, whose due date was originally July 18th. As my due date gets closer, I'm still not having contractions, I think is what they meant to say. Due date comes and goes, and I start having a dream every night of my granddad, so I finally call my grandma and ask her, hey, when is granddad's birthday, because I remember it being in July. She tells me it was July 25th. I told her that's when I would have the baby, and guess what my son's birthday is? July 25th. My brother called at night. I told my daughter that I had to answer because something is seriously wrong. My dad collapsed, and they were working on him. He died. I felt like someone was going to die days before. Not mine, but my mom's. Once when I was 15, my entire family was going out for the day to attend an extended family barbecue. Most of the time I didn't go to these as they lasted all day, and I told my parents I was just going to stay at home, which was normal. But this time, for some unknown reason at the time, my mom said no. Even after I begged to stay home, she doubled down and said that I had to go because she had a bad feeling. So I went. When we got home that night, we discovered that the house had been broken into and robbed while we were gone. I was doing tarot readings for random people because I just started doing them and needed practice. I did a reading for a couple, and all I could think about was someone they knew was pregnant and no one knew yet. They said they had a daughter that was married but didn't have any kids, and the rest of the family was either too old or already had all the kids that they wanted. I also read that it was the girl with the first letter of M in her name. Their daughter was Megan, but they swore that she wasn't pregnant. I told them that they needed to lean on her or she would need them during the pregnancy. A few weeks later, I see them again. Mind you, when I did their reading, that was their first time I ever met them, and their daughter found out the next day after their reading that she was pregnant, but miscarried the day that I bumped into them. They were heading to go be with her because she was so scared and upset. Because of this, I now use tarot not only for readings, but to help my psychic abilities. Lastly, they now call me the Town Witch. Not my story, but my mom's and sister's. When my sister was around a few years older than my age, I can't remember if my mom said that I was born or not, but my sister asked if she could go to a party days prior, and she said yes. But the day/night of the party, she told my sister that she changed her mind. My sister was pissed, but like the next day they found out that the party had got shot up badly. I can't remember if my mom had said anyone that had passed or not, but every time we talk about it, it gives me chills. My sister is now in her 20s with my niece. Love them both, and I'm glad she never went to the party. My husband came home from work with a migraine, and I slept on the sofa so he could get some rest in bed. At 2 a.m., I woke up, bolted upright. I never wake up in the middle of the night, and had a sudden urge to check on him. He was really poorly, sweating and talking gibberish. I took him to the hospital, and he was diagnosed with meningitis. Doctors said that if I didn't wake up, he would have been dead within 2 hours. When my cousin was killed, my other cousin, his sister, was driving and suddenly hit the brakes because she felt a sharp, strong pain in her stomach and felt weird and uneasy. She brushed it off as maybe the food that she had just eaten didn't agree with her stomach. A few minutes later, she got the call to let her know that her brother was shot and died. When my son was 10 months old, he got really sick. I took him to the hospital close to me that everyone knows is trash. They ran 0 tests on him, didn't check his breathing or anything, and sent us home saying that it was the flu. If they didn't run any fucking tests, then how would they know that it was the flu? These people piss me off. I had a gut feeling that it wasn't, and I refused to go home. I drove 45 minutes to the nearest hospital where I walked in, went and talked to the triage nurse. Before I even got a few words out, she was yelling to put my son in her arms now. She then ran up to the back, called some doctors and nurses, and immediately his heart rate and breathing were extremely low, and they were doing their best to help him. Turns out that he had RSV, pneumonia, and bronchitis, which had all come on quite quickly within a few days, so it took him out. They said if I didn't listen to my gut, he wouldn't have made it through the night. Advocate for yourself and your children. Always. Always, always. Come back for the next episode.
For centuries, people have reported seeing a massive hairy creature lurk through the woods of North America. Thousands of sightings have been reported from the Pacific Northwest all the way to Florida. But every piece of evidence we've seen so far has had one thing in common. It's blurry, but this new footage is very different. This has been some of the most shocking and most convincing evidence we've seen of Bigfoot in decades. And the one question I have looking at this footage is, what is his hair care routine? How does a creature living in the woods have hair this healthy? I examined the footage really closely and noticed that he stole some of Elf's hair care from another camper. And honestly, this has made everything make so much sense. Why is every photo of Bigfoot so blurry? Maybe he's avoiding the humidity. Why does he stay so deep in the forest? Less heat damage. Why are his sightings so rare? Wash day. And at this point, I have no other option but to investigate. If this is what keeps Bigfoot's mane looking like that, I need answers.
Dude, what the hell?
I have spent years talking about paranormal mysteries online, yet I think I just solved the biggest mystery of all, how Bigfoot has better hair than me.
I don't know who to ask because I don't have any indigenous friends, but I had a very intense, I have one friend, but she hasn't replied. But anyway, and I don't remember the tribe she belongs to, but I had a very, 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 very intense dream once again. And this dream was so specific that when I Googled what this deity or god was, I literally got an answer right away. Long story short, I was walking up some stairs, white stairs, and the stairs were cast iron, and they were helping me walk up the stairs because the railings were flimsy, metallic, and everything was painted white. and everything was getting old and rusty, the metal railings. And this lady said, here, I'll hold the railings for you as you go up these cast iron stairs that were painted white. She told me, just keep going and then you can meet us in these bleachers. So as I keep walking up, the staircase turns into a mountaintop. I am on the mountain with shrubbery and greenery, and there's like vines and trees, and I'm like, wait a minute, where am I? And I look around and I am literally at the highest point of a mountain. Mind you, the stairs were attached to a building, and that's how I even got there. And I was at the top of the building, the highest building I could think of. And I remember saying to myself, I can't look down. That's how high I was. So when it transformed into a mountaintop, I was confused. So I remember turning around to see the crowd behind me because I was supposedly waiting for some sort of show. That's what they told me it was going to be. But that we all had to take our seat, right? But because I was new, I was lost. So when I turned around to look at everybody, they were covered with like,
might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
A forest of some sort. And greenery. 1 second. So, like I was trying to say hours ago, when I looked back at everybody, they seemed to be surrounded by like a forest. And all of a sudden I can hear screaming. The screaming I heard sounded like of, oh my God, it's here type of, like, kind of like if you were to see Superman come out the sky and you're in awe, but then you're also scared. So that's what I heard. And I was trying to look through the vines and of like this foresty looking thing that was surrounding everybody that was once there. And when I looked through everything, I could see a giant, like massive indigenous Indian chief looking man with huge hands and huge feet. And he had a headdress that was massive with all these feathers. And he was wearing like a, I would assume was like some sort of cloth with some sort of, I don't know, it was like, I can't even describe it. I don't know. It was just like a cloth with V-shaped imagery. That's what it looked like from, I'm like trying to remember because it was hours ago now. And he was massive. And I remember a lady said, sit down, from the crowd that was behind all the shrubbery. She screamed, sit down or he will pick you. And I was like, what? I was so lost. And when I could see through the shrubbery, I see him and he turned and he looked at me and we locked eyes. And before I could even express anything, I felt this fear of this massive, like I knew in that moment that this giant indigenous, it was a god. It was a very potent god. And he ran towards me and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And before I could even think, I remember clenching and holding on to myself like, oh my God. And he ran towards me and he turned his bottom half, so like his legs or feet, turned into an eagle and the rest of him was normal, but then he had like wings and he screeched a loud screech. I can't even describe it. It sounded so loud and it was mixed with the screeching of an eagle / screaming / like a man screaming / wind blowing. It was so powerful. And it grabbed me by my ankles and threw me. And I was like upside down. And it was like shooting me straight into the sky. straight into the fucking sky. And I was like, oh my God. And it was taking me into just straight darkness into the sky. It was so powerful. And I just felt the cold of the clouds and the coldness of the air in the sky. And I just kept telling myself, I need to relax. I need to relax, because I'm like, oh my God, where is it taking me? And I remember holding myself, like holding shoulder to shoulder, folding my arms, holding myself, because I was like all over the place. And it just kept screeching and screeching and taking me all, I mean, I was way past the fucking clouds. Like, it was so crazy. And I woke up only because my cat bothered me. And mind you, as I'm shooting up in the sky, I said, I have to surrender. I have to surrender. And it was just the screeching of this eagle / wind blowing. And the cat licked my arm, and that's when I woke up. And I was like, what the fuck was that? So when I went searching online, it was the closest thing that I could find was the Thunderbird. So I have no idea. I wish if somebody could see this and they have like an indigenous friend, it's very fucking long, I'm so sorry, or connections, can somebody comment? Because it literally, from what I was reading online about this indigenous god, it's like damn near the same of the Thunderbird, especially being on the mountaintop, like so high. I don't know. Anyway, by the way, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to appropriate. I just want to understand the dream. Okay? Please forgive me. But if somebody can help me with this, that would be so fucking awesome.